So when I'm not podcasting, I've actually taken some time away from talking about the regular stuff, the OnlyFans, the online dating, the all that kind of stuff that's going on, because obviously the news has changed around. I don't want to be political, and I hopefully in my program, if you listen to the program, you notice I've not been trying to be political at all. I'm trying to avoid that altogether. Anyway, I'm going to take a story now that is off the beaten end. It's more back into my wheel well about radio, because again, radio, I wanted to be better. I want to be better entertaining. Here's something that's very important. I think this is a very important story Sean Ross actually says here in his column on radioinside.com. Why music radio needs news again. Now, the reason I say this is because music radio in other countries, they actually have news reports. And you actually know what's going on in the world. A little bit of sports, a lot of news, a lot of information that's culturally important, holding systems and institutions accountable, whether it's government, whether it's civic leaders, whether it's celebrities, whatever, whoever it is, people of power, people of privilege, people of influence. That's important. In your community, in your neighborhood, in your country. The news is supposed to be able to do that. They're supposed to be voice of the voiceless. And we should make the news available to everybody that should be able to hear it. But it doesn't mean you need to have it on for an hour long every day. No, 2-3 minutes. You let everybody get informed. You let them know what's going on. Because the other thing, too, is that if you have it on music radio stations, you're actually informing your audience. Taking away some of that music, some of that commercial inventory that people don't give a shit about and giving it back to the news, I love that. BBC Radio, I listen to quite a bit. They have the news beat. They've been doing that for years on all their channels. They'll take time, a couple of minutes at the half hour, because they're also non-commercial. They'll take 2 minutes at the half hour, and they'll take a 15-minute segment at the end of the day to talk about the news. I love it. And you get to know what's going on. And you're informed in such a short amount of time. It's good to know, at least just to get certain headlines so you know what's going on in your life when you're away. At least you get a little bit of something that you're getting a little bit informed. Now, here's what we got. There is news again on major market music radio. Sometimes it's the bulletin from the news station down the hall or the on-air host negotiating a new set of duties. There are listeners beginning here on the airwaves of music radio stations. We thought they wouldn't call a radio station anymore for anything other than the impossible question. Now we have too many questions to answer and none of them trivial. If a host says to listeners, maybe you have something you want to talk about this afternoon, they usually do. So for news on FM music stations, outside of mornings, it's the exception that proved the rule by 2010. Discussion was usually the same, and there's always some news station in the cluster that will do the news. And increasingly other places to get traffic as well, but traffic was sponsored. So since the COVID-19 pandemic, after a decade of being treated the opposite, we're now seeing they have done it amongst radio's own fiscal crisis with colleagues on furlough, kids in the next room, and concern for their own well-being. We've urged some of them to share their own stories, but we're watching them fight like flight attendants in terms of times of turbulence, watching them like flight attendants, hoping not to see too much concern in their eyes. But listeners want information. The rise of all news FMs coming on the March people meter ratings of Nielsen and almost all news talk outlets in April show that. Yet there was always a feeling that there was never quite enough information on the air, particularly on music radio. Through all this, music radio needs regular news content again. And it's true. Now, one of the stories I talk about here is when you see morning stations or stations around the country, right now WBLS in New York, 92Q Baltimore, WDAS Philadelphia, they're confirming what George Floyd's murder has proven to all. R&B radio has no choice but to be ready to respond at any time. Other stations scramble. The pre-recorded blurs from the news talk station down the hall sound wrong in tone. They also sound 4 hours ago. And the other stations struggling through news bulletins they never trained to deliver and talking about all of radio's response. There's no intent to discuss anything as trivial as good radio at times like this, merely our ability to be of service. That's the point. You should be for the community. If you can't be out there, then tell people you have resources. Tell them what's going on. Give them something to talk about. Do we want to hear gossip about Kendall Jenner and whatever she's making? She's in the top list of the Forbes top 100. Do you want to hear about that? Do you want to hear what Bachelor's doing this and that? What other stories are going on? Oh, BTS has got a new album, or Taylor Swift's got something else going on, and she's connecting with somebody. Do you want to hear about that? Does that gossip really matter? How about real news? Take a couple of minutes to take some time. So if music radio had news directors, there would have been a resource for the music personality suddenly having to talk about larger issues for the last 6 months. If music radio had access to regular information, I can't guarantee whether those stations would have benefited, but I can say that UK's music radio, without the ratings issues to contend with, is relatively healthy, despite the daytime news bulletins on this commercial and even younger targeted stations. So when radio emerges from the budget crisis, and particularly if it does not, it can allow national radio to be national. So we know some content transcends geography, but the stations that choose live and local as a franchise need to make it more than a positioner, need to be live and local even on weekends and overnights. Again, live and local for music radio is very important. Playing the music that people care about, talking about the news that people care about, doing things that people care about. That's why they listen to your damn radio station. Sean Ross actually finishes up and says, broadcasters will not be able to spend on everything, but the events of 2020 have given local news a new priority. Funny, because that was the thing they used to have in the back of the day, 2020 news from some great radio stations. When you're talking about CKLW or KFRC and all these different stations around the country, the Drake Chenault stations, for me, you radio files out there, they all had 2020 news. And then we had 2020 sports for WFAN and things like that. Listeners won't just need us when the hurricane comes, they need us now. And the thing is, we see that happen. I remember when we had news after 9/11. We have so much going on with the news. There's nothing wrong with putting a minute or two of news out there. I like this idea. So should you.